welcome back to IndieCent. And if you're wondering where that episode on Closure and the Count Lucanor is, well, I'm an idiot.
I ate it.
To be more accurate, my mic settings were wrong when we were recording that episode, so guess what didn't get picked up by my mic?
Yeah, Dark is just covering for me. He just left the episode lying around the house and I just ate it.
We'll also be going through some changes soon as Lamar is quit the show due to real life issues he needs to take care of, and we hope things get better. So, which means this will be the first episode I had to edit, so if it's terrible, you know why.
Because me. Just.
But. So, we will hopefully be getting a new third soon. We were supposed to have a guest for this episode, a friend of mine from Infinite Rainy Day, but due to some unexpected delays, he had to go to bed because it's like 3 in the morning where he is, and his body could not take it anymore.
It's 3 a.m. where I am too, but I have become addicted to just late night Teen Titans fanfiction and basically that's just it. I was trying to think of a funny second thing, but no, it's really just the fanfiction. I just really want Beast Boy and Raven to get together already. I went a little too far there and revealed some... So hi, welcome to IndieCent. We're talking about video games.
If you're wondering what our opinions were on the Count Lucanor and Closure, we both agreed Closure was just kind of a neat thing, and it was okay.
Yeah.
And we both really liked the Count Lucanor. And that's as far as we're going to go because we have 3 games to cover tonight.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Oh boy.
Before we left, Lamar suggested that we play the beginner's guide, and I decided that we would also play 2 other games connected to it: the Stanley Parable and Dr. Langeskov, the Tiger, and the Terribly Cursed Emerald, a Whirlwind Heist to Electric Boogaloo. No one's seen the movie that's referencing.
But you know, we know the meme. That's almost like seeing the movie.
Excuse me. Instead of original jokes.
Yeah. Why get original comedy when you could be listening to IndieCent? Wait, no.
Yes, but if you so just so you guys know what you're in for, if you like me gushing about things, you're going to like this episode a lot.
If you like me also gushing about things, but at the same time making an effort to try and be contrarian, so I'll just be like, actually, the Stanley Parable's terrible, and I didn't laugh at any of it. Then get ready for an hour of that.
Oh, there's just so much to talk about. I mean, like, one of these... I'm surprised to learn that one of these games had Grant Kirkhope, the composer for, like, Rare's Banjo-Kazooie series, did music for it. Oh, and they also got Justin Roiland from Rick and Morty to do a voice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the weirdest thing. And every time, and he sounds exactly like he does in those episodes where they're just doing random TV stuff. Like, oh, I'm an eggplant. I'm an eggplant.
Oh, I'm running away, but I'm so scared. I'm an eggplant.
I hate my idea. Just starts throwing stuff.
It's so Tommy Wiseau.
Oh my god. Hello, Tama. Well, it looks like Tama's joining us.
Yay!
Are you recording? In case you're wondering, everyone, we are talking to someone right now.
Yes. Oh, can I do Tama's voice as well? Well, before he starts recording.
Oh,
hey, I'm Tama. I'm like Elmo except cooler.
And very gay. Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Go to audible.com/Tama
Yay.
to get a free trial period of his voice.
Yay.
This is gonna be magical.
Welcome to Joe Danger Part 2.
Yeah. For those who don't know,
I'm not editing out this silence. I don't know what I'm doing.
for those who don't know,
IndieCent, I don't know what I'm doing.
it's like 3 a.m. in the morning in the UK, so
Yep.
it's like insomnia fucking central.
It's that's. I can't even imagine staying up that late anymore, and I used to all the time. Now I go to bed at like 8 or 9 p.m. so I can get up at 4.
You lunatic. You complete lunatic.
Are you recording?
I'm recording, yeah.
Well, hey.
Alright, then let's continue on. Anyways, I should mention that the games we'll be looking at tonight are from Davey Weirdrin and William Pug. That's how I'm going to pronounce his name because it looks amusing.
Also, it's better than William Pooh, which is probably how you'd really pronounce that.
Pew, I think.
That's...
Oh yeah, Pew. Pew, like that YouTuber who paid people to... No, let's not go there.
That's already dated by the time of recording.
God, yeah.
That way lies litigation.
Davey Weirin is an interesting fellow. He was basically a Gmodder. He used that old Gmod engine that Valve put out a long time ago, long ago, back when we had random videos of Team Fortress 2 characters horrifically out of model.
And when Valve were actually making games rather than just running Steam.
Yeah, that's true.
Halcyon days.
But the game that Davey was working on was called the Stanley Parable, which he did release in Gmod form, and then a player of the game, William Pug, which that's his name now, contacted him, and the two eventually worked together to make the HD version you can buy on Steam today.
The one you have to pay actual money for.
Yeah. The Stanley Parable. Never heard of it.
It has a bunch more endings, and it's considered a definite version. And after that, the two split off. Davey went on to do his own project, The Beginner's Guide, which he announced 2 days before it came out.
As you do.
And William Pug went on to make the development studio Crows, and made and so far just made a 15-minute comedy game about you trying to get a game working so you can play it. And if you beat it the first time, you can replay it the second time, listen to tapes with the voice of Justin Roiland, aka I want that Szechuan sauce, Morty. It's gonna take 9 more seasons, Morty.
G Morty. G Rick.
It's just the weirdest. Oh, and of course Grant Kirkhope was on that game, so it's just okay. But we'll be starting with the Stanley Parable, where it all began, and honestly, this is one of my favorite games ever. I fucking love the Stanley Parable, guys. It's about existentialism applied to examining fiction, and that is like my shit right there.
Since the Stanley Parable is so straightforwardly brilliant, I don't have many notes for the Stanley Parable. I just have, because I've written down like a few scribbles on like post-it notes, and I have lots for the Beginner's Guide and lots for Dr. Langeskov. And for the Stanley Parable, I just have, it's really good, confusion ending, best ending. My friend Lucy played it, and she got the regular, normal ending her first time playing. What a nerd. Like, I don't mean to like talk smack about my friends, but she was playing the game, and the narrator said, Stanley came to a set of locked doors. No, not locked. Stanley came to a set of doors, one on the left and one on the right. He chose the one on the left, and she chose the one on the left, like she had no curiosity in her brain. I was just disgusted. I don't talk to her anymore. It's just, where's your creativity? Where's your curiosity?
That was the first one I got, but I had already been spoiled on the game. I was just curious of what the true ending was.
Yes.
And it made all the other endings that much more special.
Yeah.
The first ending.
Confusion ending, best ending.
For those unfamiliar, even though I'm sure everyone knows about this game at this point, the Stanley Parable is a exploration game where a narrator gives you instructions, and you are cast as this player character named Stanley, who's in an office that is suddenly missing all of its employees, so you have to travel around and figure out what happens. You can listen to the narrator and discover the main story of the game, but if you don't listen to the narrator, the game goes so far off the rails, and it's glorious.
Including an ending where you can play both Minecraft and Portal 2, or Portal I think it is. Yes, that's the first ending I got.
That was the first ending I got.
God, I don't even remember what the first, second ending I got was. This game is just so British. They got a actor named Kevin Brighting to act as a narrator, and I will forever know him as the British man.
Yeah.
Because he's just so very British.
Very British. He almost makes up for Ricky Gervais. He really does.
Just everything he says, no matter if it's positive or negative, is instantly memorable.
Now, come on, Stanley.
I'm not even going to try to imitate it, because doing bad imitations of voices is kind of my thing, but for Kevin Brighting it would just be disrespecting a legend in his field. Couldn't.
Oh yeah, his voice is so deep and wonderful, even when he's insulting me for finding what I thought was a glitch but actually wasn't.
Yep. Oh, that happens so many times.
And he gets out a little guitar and starts singing about how you're a fucking loser.
It also has singularly the best achievements of any Steam game ever.
Oh.
Including the photo.
You've done the door achievement.
I've done the door achievement.
I've done the play the game for an entire Tuesday achievement.
Oh my god.
And if you mess with your system clock, you can get the don't play the game for 5 years achievement pretty easily too.
And the achievement is impossible to achieve.
That's the only one I haven't got.
The only game
really annoying me.
The only game I've ever played that genuinely does have an achievement that's impossible to achieve because there's literally no way in the game to achieve it was in Christine Love's Hate Plus, and it kind of gives you the hint because it's making a reference to that scene from Final Fantasy VII, the aftermath, where you can't revive Eric.
Oh no! Dude,
spoilers. Spoilers, man.
Just don't look at the.
I literally paused Final Fantasy VII to record this.
Christ, we're gonna have to do that for a whole new generation when the remake comes out now. Crap.
Oh no, everyone will know by then, and no one will care.
They'll change it.
Tifa dies.
Better not.
Yeah. Cloud dies.
Okay, that's fine.
Sephiroth dies.
The player dies, and the game just ends there.
And they were in a coma the whole time. Shit, I'm surprised that's not an ending in this game.
It should be. Probably.
Actually, there is one that was kind of like that, where you go down the hallway and then you're in an infinite loop and you can't escape. And the narrator keeps and the narrator keeps amplifying it, and then it just ends, and you're like a dead body outside a building, and a woman's looking at you.
Stanley started screaming. I just said I wasn't going to do his voice. God, I'm the worst.
But what it does do very cleverly as a game is it does sort of play with, how the linearity particularly in the games that it does take the engine from. So, for example, Half-Life. I would say to an extent Counter-Strike, where it's very linear. You have an objective. This is your objective. The game tells you, and you go and do these things. And then it's like, oh, you have a modicum of free will. It's like, oh, this is really interesting. What if we gave the player 2 options, 3 options, and there's obviously an ending which is the Minecraft ending, which does play upon this and goes, how much choice is too much choice in a video game, and with video games taking an increasing sort of movement in the last couple of years, typified particularly by games like Horizon Zero Dawn, Legend of Zelda, the new Zelda, and the newest Mario. It's sort of, if you give somebody infinite choice in a video game, how does that affect story? Or if you make a story something very linear and story driven, does that affect the player's enjoyment?
There's a lot of stuff going on in this game subtextually that it sometimes spells out as text, and the most interesting thing is the entire game is basically Davey Weirin commenting, just sort of talking to himself about the nature between the developer and the player, and how they're ultimately going to be enemies no matter how good you design a game.
Which I definitely think the Minecraft ending does, sort of the ending where it sort of goes, we will sort of, we'll look at this and so we'll play test this again. It's very much sort of a game that sort of approaches, video gaming as a concept, video gaming as sort of, how much free will does the player actually have in the game,
Yeah, it really shows us off well with the narrator and everything he's trying to do. Really, he just wants to tell this story that he thinks is really good, but when you look at the story, you kind of realize it doesn't make sense within this medium, because it's like about Stanley discovering there's a mind control facility and shutting it off. Except Stanley doesn't have control of himself, he's controlled by you. And there are actually some endings where he regains control from you.
That was it. The ending where you switch off the mind control machine. And this is probably... And this is actually very beautifully done. And for the first time in the game, you go out of the facility and the big metal door opens and Stanley moves of his own free will. And it's a very, very beautifully done section, because you suddenly go, hang on a minute, why isn't the camera turning where I want it to go? And for the first time in the entire game, Stanley has his own free will of it all.
Oh, and that one ending where he tried to kill himself by constantly falling over the stairs over and over.
You do still control him there, though. There was another bit where Stanley gets free will, and that's probably after the confusion ending, of course, best ending. Then that's probably my favourite ending. There's an ending where the narrator becomes aware that, oh, hang on, you're not Stanley, you're a real person controlling him, aren't you? And he gets really angry and ends up resetting the game. But then he realises that without a real player inputting Stanley's decisions, then you're just stuck on like the roof above a room, and you can look down and see Stanley, and the narrator just has a little breakdown, just going, Stanley, you've got to make a choice, left or right. They're both correct, Stanley. Please, just move forwards. Are you all right? And you are. I was very, very surprised by the range of emotions that the game captures that aren't just comedy. I felt a little bit sorry for the narrator. He tried to kill me. He tried to take me on a wonderful journey with shining lights and a weird ledge that was just the right height to kill myself. And sometimes he just disappeared, and it was really creepy not having him there.
I also couldn't help but notice this game kind of loves cosmic nihilism.
Like the press K to die. Please die. Sort of end.
And like the stuff like the slideshow that explains the nature of choice and how meaningless it actually is. And it has like that kid getting fire from an adult. and he gives him like lighter fluid.
And to burn the baby.
Oh, and then of course there's the ending where you're trapped in an apartment, slowly being surrounded by featureless mannequins, because the narrator's just passively aggressively toying with you, giving you a new story that's way more depressing than the one he originally wanted to tell.
Have you guys had the escape pod ending?
I think I've had all of them except the art ending,
Yeah,
because
except
I'm
the
not
art.
going to do that for 24 hours.
The escape pod one was the, outside of obviously the confusion ending, best ending. I'm going to say that
Oh, yeah.
every single time.
Yeah.
The escape pod ending was the most memorable to me because there wasn't... It's the only one that isn't really explained at all or hyped up to. It's when you walk into your boss's office, and if you just walk back out of the office as soon as you can, then you can get out before the doors automatically shut, and then you just walk back to the beginning and go to a different loading zone, and there's an escape pod at the top of like 10 flights of stairs. But there's no explanation or narration, and it's incredibly creepy, to be honest. There's just nothing there. It's... Yeah. Other noises.
Yes.
Oh, and I should also point out something. There's never a point in this game where Stanley has free will, because he always resets back to the office, to the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
It makes this clear because instead of sending you back to the title screen once you get an ending, it sends you back to the office. And it just starts the story over again.
Maybe the
I felt like kind of a shallow idiot, because when I heard about the premise of the Stanley Parable of, Stanley sits in a building, and a computer tells him to tap buttons, and he presses those buttons, and it makes him happy. I have a very boring, repetitive desk job, so I thought it was a metaphor for that. But then it turned out it's a metaphor for just video games in general.
And life.
and existential angst.
So much. God, that is his thing Davey Weirin just loves to dive into.
Mm-hmm.
He's Davey weirding me out.
I really should have
That's
checked out
awful.
I really should have checked out the original version to see and compare, so I could see how much Pug added to this version we have on Steam. Because there was a lot more endings added, some things were changed around. So, and like since we played Langeskov, we can already tell that he has a very different sensibility to these sorts of things than Weirdern does.
Yeah.
I think we can probably blame him for the art ending.
What do you mean blame?
Have you seen it on YouTube?
That's the best ending. Other than the confusion ending, of course.
There's an ending where you test out different games for the narrator, and one of them is an art game where where a cardboard baby cutout slowly drifts to a fire.
Minecraft one. That's hilarious. It's like, press this button.
Yeah, but if you keep playing that game and keep pressing the button so the baby doesn't go to the fire, and do that for 24 hours straight, you get the art ending. And then you're suddenly transported to a void where the only things on screen are like, this is art.
It does have the best credits of any game I've played, which is just the random museum you can go around where it's just everything from all the assets of the game and all the original designs. There's a really cleverly done credit sequence.
There's another brilliant bit of credits where, because if you just open up the game, you can select credits from the menu, and if you type in the word secret before you click on the credits, it goes to Davey Reedon just tapping along at his desk and playing the kazoo. It's fantastic.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I think you should. I think we should edit that mute. Okay, actually, no, editing stuff in is really hard work. but yeah, look it up on YouTube, listeners.
Go do that now. Listen to it. Well, listen to it while we sit here and wait.
Yeah, let's just. So, how you guys doing?
Good.
They're off listening to music. We can, I've been meaning to say, I think all of our listeners really smell. We can say that they're listening to the secret credits music.
Oh no, they're still here.
I think that I think the Stanley Parable is going to be a game that's going to age really well as time goes on.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because a lot what it has to say is very universal, and a lot of what it's trying to do is raising important questions developers need to ask themselves as we get further and further along in this medium.
Mm.
I would probably call it, definitely for a comedy game, it's the most revolutionary comedy game we've had in ever.
Yeah, there's a reason this game won so many awards when it came out.
Well, it's sort of, I suppose, if you can.
There's something I wanted to mention about this.
Yeah.
When they were releasing this game, in order to advertise it, they gave some Let's Players on YouTube demos, but they had exclusive lines in each of those demos for that particular Let's Player. So.
Yeah.
There was one moment that really freaked me out when I was watching like Steam Train on the Game Grumps channel, and in the middle of the episode, the narrator just goes, "God damn it, Ross!" And then Ross is like, "What?" Neither of them expected it. And I'm like, "What's going on?" I don't smoke weed, but even I had a weed moment there.
Or would that be a Davy Reed moment?
But what it,
That's just as terrible as the first one.
Don't ever do that again.
Please, no.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we can agree that Stanley Parable is brilliant.
Yep.
Definitely.
Just
That brings us to... Oh, sorry, you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's great. I legitimately can't really think of any big flaws. Or any flaws. Or anything.
That brings us to Dr. Langeskov, the tiger and the terribly cursed Chaos Emerald. A whirlwind heist. This, as I mentioned before, Pug and Weirdrin ended up drifting away from each other. The studio they released the Stanley Parable under, Galactic Cafe, I don't think exists anymore. And they made their own studios with Weirdrin making Everything Unlimited, LTD, and Pug. I'm never gonna remember his name.
Yeah.
Making Crows. Langenoff ended up coming up after the beginner's guide, but it's like 15 minutes long, so it'll be the easiest to talk about.
And it's free.
It's also fantastic.
And free.
Yeah, I wouldn't say fantastic, but I did like it.
Oh.
And
Because when I was playing this, I could instantly tell that Davey Weirdrin did not have anything to do with it. Because it is a much more simple game than the Stanley Parable, which is fine because it's a free game. But like, you can kind of tell that this studio's not gonna have the same sense of humor. But which is weird because they got in Justin Roiland and his entire show is basically nihilism. The animation.
The narrator is Simon Amstel, and if you're in Britain, Simon Amstel's a fairly famous name. If you've ever seen like one of those YouTube compilations of the greatest ever panel show insults, those things are like 60% Simon Amstel. He looks like really like just calm, and I'm trying to think of the really nice way to say scrawny, but but yeah, he's a kind of just a regular guy, but he's just vicious.
think James
put downs.
Think James McAvoy American viewers, and then slightly pointier and slightly angrier.
Yeah.
I don't know who either of those people are.
Well. Oh, it's great. I'm trying to think of my favourite Simon Amstel line, but that's the only one he's got is like, "It's too hot for TV," so I can't say it.
But yes, Dr. Langeskov is an interesting game because it tries a similar hook to the Stanley Parable, but doesn't go in the same direction. Basically, you start the game, you're expecting to have some sort of fun heist game. There are like little hints that come up, but then the game just glitches out, and suddenly you're in front of the title screen again, except there's stuff around it, like wall, and then you realize you can move, and you're in a waiting room.
Yeah.
To play the game.
And it's not, yeah, and it's not long before the narrator, Mr. Amstel, explains that for some reason someone else is already playing the game and you're just going to have to wait, and this has never happened before, and also everyone responsible for making the game work is on strike.
One of my favourite things is if you look at the Steam page for the game. I'm going to see if I can just bring it up right now, because they really did. Like, I can see how some people would think, oh, they really milked that joke dry, but they just went as far as they possibly could. It's great. This is the description on the game. A 15-minute heist game by Crows, and directed by William Pugh. Slip into the soft-soled shoes of the mastermind responsible for the greatest heist. Oh god, I can't do this anymore. I'm joining the strike. Good luck writing this Steam description.
I would love. It's a good thing it is a free game, because given the sort of sudden sort of Yabu sucks sort of thing this game does, if it actually cost any money, you would get so many refunds for this. People going, wait a minute, what's this? This isn't a heist game. I didn't sign up for this. Where's my refund?
Honestly, you probably get sued.
Yeah.
It's the same reason they couldn't sell Frog Fractions 2 as the way they wanted to, because if they did, they get sued for false advertising.
The wonder of free games.
I'm still bitter over that.
Yes, but yeah, basically your job in this game is to keep the game running, but you're completely in the background and can't see what's going on with the person playing it, and you just have to take instructions and accept things as they are and hope everything doesn't explode because things go wrong. Especially because there's an ongoing joke with a telephone where you're supposed to pick it up and talk to someone, except the only command you can do with the telephone is to click it, and that just has you slam it.
Leading to
Listening to Simon Amstel just gradually going insane. As he just goes, pick up, that might be important. No, no, why? Do you just not understand how phones work?
Apparently.
The thing I did notice about this game is the humour is very much like another. Actually, ironically, we spoke about Portal a moment ago. It's very similar to Wheatley in Portal 2. I mean, obviously you've got another British comedian, but some of the deliveries, that sort of slightly frustrated, the slightly frustrated, slightly sort of, I guess, sort of very flappy British going, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, all the time. It's very similar to Portal. I even think in terms of the sort of behind the scenes thing, you know, the sort of seeing almost the guts of what makes a video game is almost like akin to sort of some of the sections of Portal as well. You've got lots of sort of catwalks and sort of sections of metal. I mean, obviously it's...
Yeah, but it doesn't really work as like a joke on game development, because everything's done so literally that it doesn't really work as a metaphor.
Yeah, it's more of like a theatre production.
Except for that ending part where everything's exploding. As someone who's had to do several coding projects, I can tell you that is the most relatable thing I've ever seen.
As someone who's worked in several office jobs, I can confirm that I'm still looking at the store page, and the angry resignation letter on the store page is signed by a woman named Tina, and I can confirm every job I've worked at has had a Tina. So this is very realistic, I think.
Yeah, one thing I did enjoy is after you beat the game, you can replay it and get special tapes that have just like Justin Roiland from Rick and Morty doing weird voices, being like a guy in planning stages or auditioning for an eggplant enemy.
The pencil game.
I'm an eggplant!
I think that William was... I mean, we've talked about the Stanley Parable's achievements and how they're a bit strange, to put it lightly. I think William was probably the one behind that. because I've had the achievements for Dr. Langeskov, and they're purposefully just designed to be a bit weird. They're all kind of collecty things. Like, you might notice when you go through the game that you can occasionally pick up coins from tables, and there's also just some pretzels, some giant pretzels just lying around the area. And the thing
stop eating the food off the floor.
And the thing I really liked about this kind of anti-achievement thing is that you might think, oh, okay, there's probably just a guide, and it's a 15-minute game, it's not much. There's a guide, you just go through, you eat all the pretzels, as stupid as that sounds, and you get the achievement. If you tab out of the game at any moment, or open up another window, just anything, you don't get the achievement. So you have to. It is very much like a purposefully anti-fun experiment where you have to grab a piece of paper and go, all right, let me just write this down. There's one behind the vending machine, one
or
on the table.
Just use your phone.
Oh yeah, that too. Well,
the wonder of
This is going to be a studio you want to watch because apparently Justin Roiland's already doing another project with them, and that has me excited.
Ooh.
Because I want to hear more of his wonderful voice, no matter what it's doing. Now I'm trying to come up with quotes from those TV specials of Rick and Morty, because they're just so. Calling all Jed Michael Bensons. 5-6 Jed Michael Bensons.
Kate, we have to go back. That's from Rick and Morty, right?
Gee, Rick.
Sure, why not?
I enjoyed it, but it is a very sort of. It's a 15 minutes game, and with all the will in the world, you can only do so much with 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm worried about in the future is that Pug might be a bit of a one-trick pony. Because meta humor and screwing with a player seems to be all he really is really good at, and eventually that does wear thin. So I don't know what he's going to do for longer projects.
I've written a note next to Dr. Langeskov that just says, talk more shit about Lucy, because I showed her Dr. Langeskov too, and she finished it in 3 minutes. She didn't listen to any of the narration. I should stop showing her video games. She just doesn't get it, man. God. So, I really hope she never listens to this.
Of course, this brings us to the meat of the discussion.
Yes.
The beginner's guide. This is already, I think in my top 10 of my favorite games ever. So, yeah, I liked it.
I think it's probably one of the best games I've played on Steam, full stop. I hesitate to call it, strictly speaking, a game. It's more...
Oh no, it's absolutely a game. If you want to see a game that's not a game, I want to direct you to the Cherry Tree High 2 I Am I Girls, because it's literally just a kinetic novel. You click and then you just read text, and that's the entire game. But this is absolutely a game, and it's kind of expecting you to think like you would if you were playing something like the Stanley Parable, and then so it's like tricking you to think it's going to do one thing, and then what it ends up doing is crushing your soul.
Oh yeah, it does that, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
This is a very, very grim, dark game. Yeah, it gets uncomfortably real by the time it wraps up.
But in places it is also just almost searingly beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. The ending had me in awe. But if you don't know what this is, the beginner's guide pretends that it's sort of a living museum of a game. It's voiced by Davey Weirin himself, who's just referring to himself by name, although it's not the real Davey, as will be made clear very, very quickly. And he's showing you the games of someone named Coda, starting with like a Counter-Strike map, and then going further in, explaining the do's and don'ts of game development, what they were thinking of when they designed certain things, like this one recurring door puzzle, or their love of mazes and glitches
or
and
lampposts.
prisons. Shh. And it becomes very clear as the game keeps going on that you have a very unreliable narrator, and by the end, you're left questioning everything you've just been through as the game shows you one last incredible sight. And where the Stanley Parable was a comedic criticism of game development, this isn't really interested in that sort of thing. It's something much more personal, I've found, but not in the way that it seems to be saying on the surface, if that makes sense. Because it almost feels like a bit of a trap to talk about.
Yeah. Of the 3 games that we're talking about, this is the only one where I think we might need some kind of spoiler thing, where it's like, okay, so yeah, the ending is big, but don't listen past this bit if you don't want to expect, because there's actually a lot of value in this one.
Definitely.
Dr. Langeskov is a joke. Beginner's Guide, really quite something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So, basically, what I like about this game so much, besides the obvious emotional impact, is how it paces everything to get you there. It starts off just like it's promised, and you're just like going through these weird games someone made, getting an idea of who they are from them, and like get some interesting narration. They're like little hints that something's off, like Davey will, when you hit a maze and get stuck in it for a bit, Davey will clear you out of the maze really fast, explaining that he doesn't know why it's there.
And you can turn around and go back to the maze, and you can hear Davey say in a really confused voice, "Oh, okay, I guess you really like mazes then." There's
but mostly it's just going through these games and kind of trying to find meaning from them while getting meaning told to you by Davey, only for that meaning to start becoming more and more questionable despite how obvious the symbolism he's describing seems.
As someone who overanalyzes pretty much everything, just every line in every book and every item in every game, everything, I think this is definitely a game about over-analysis. The fact that in the very first level it's the Counter-Strike level and he's walking around and he talks about how in some mods you see a box and it's not quite right, it's hovering a bit, and he sees that as a little signature that the modder has left, a little hey, this was made by me. And someone could just say, actually I think that's just somebody who doesn't really know how to code boxes very well.
It is, but I mean, as a game as a whole, it is very much sort of. It's almost like, I suppose one could use an analogy. You're going through a gallery and you're looking at an artist's work, or you'll even potentially, let's use the sort of secondary school example, the works of Shakespeare. What Shakespeare actually means here is, he had, I don't know. The curtains were blue, and you sort of go, well, actually, what does do the curtains represent? I don't know, sorrow or something, or do the curtains represent the sky, or do the curtains represent escape? And maybe, just maybe, the curtains are just curtains. We to return to the sort of the concept of the famous painting by surrealist painter, come to me, which this is not a pipe. And it basically goes...
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
And essentially what you go, well, what is it then? Is the pipe, and then we sort of run it through Freud, and it says, well, Freud would say, well, the pipe is obviously representative of the phallic. This is sort of, the masculinity, the manhood, and somebody else would go, well, it represents sort of, the way in which pictorial art was sort of going, in terms of surrealism, would go, oh, well, this is obviously a representation of the image becoming sort of somehow detached from what it actually says. And somebody else will go, well, of course it's not a pipe, it's a picture of a pipe. And
which is probably the most
Yeah.
correct thing considering what I know about these sorts of artists.
And what the beginner's guide appears to be is sort of a selection of thematic demos, and they are mostly demo quality. Most of the games in this are sort of very small, often sort of very basic. I mean, we're talking sort of very prototypal things, one person in their bedroom, and what the narrator, the sort of seems to try and sort of thread them together. Oh, there's this sort of this consistent thing. Oh, he's trying to tell me something, and it's like, and he keeps going back to the door puzzle. And to be honest, what the door puzzle may represent is just an asset he's got, an asset that he likes using, because he doesn't know how to code any better doors.
Just like how he likes only making games about prisons.
But maybe I just like making games about prisons.
One thing that I loved about people, something that got a bit meta about the whole, looking into this meaning, what could this possibly mean, is that a lot of people played the game and said, coda is actually CODA. Coda is a Latin word meaning a piece of puzzle, meaning something that Davy was looking for meaning in
No,
this
it
piece.
doesn't.
And I played it and I was just like, maybe coda just means like because he coded the game. maybe that's it. Could that be?
One of the really fascinating things is it's sort of taken on its own mythical status on the internet, and people are saying, oh, I think I may have met Coda in the past. And we don't, I mean, it's very clear that again, the game does leave this very open-ended as to whether Coda is actually in fact a real person, whether in fact the games we are playing are in fact, by another person, and he's just co-opted them and sort of tried to sew them together into this narrative, which actually I believe...
I know how that started, and it's the dumbest fucking thing imaginable. There was a writer at Destructoid, I don't want to name her because I know something stupid is bound to come up because of it. She's been targeted by harassment before, so. But basically, she sort of made an observation that the game kind of seemed like that, even though she knew that wasn't the case, and figured everyone would be smart enough to realize she was just making a jokey observation. And it turns out people are stupid.
Oh yeah.
Brexit.
It's so weird because when Davey released this game, he actually asked that people just give their... He wouldn't tell anyone what it was actually about, and he wanted to hear what people thought it was about. So it's kind of a big giveaway of what he's part of what he's trying to do here. This part of the game does feel like it's being just like a Rorschach test, but then of course there's the whole Davey narration stuff, and I don't think that's just fucking around with the player.
No, I think almost whether Coda is actually Davey himself, and perhaps this is sort of, he's analysing. I do wonder whether this is actually his own work, and Coda is just he's taken a facet of himself or an element of himself and sort of taken it and sort of twisted it around. So he's almost sort of attacking himself.
That would explain that messed up part where the assets of the games are attacking the creator itself, and they end up destroying older games.
I mean, this game does have some incredible visual, and actually, it at times actually quite... I don't know actually quite actually in points upsetting from the point of view of somebody who is creative. I mean, particularly the sequence where, and here comes the spoiler warning, you essentially play a person interrogating a machine that clearly represents the Coda character, and eventually you go, oh well, we'll destroy everything Coda's ever got. And what you do is you're in one of the first demos, you're sort of given, it's a gun, it's a sort of a space shooting game, and it basically is explained after a while that you run out of ammo, and you just go through most of the other games that you've created thus far with a gun with essentially infinite ammo. You just destroy everything until it's almost, sort of, it just shows the background behind what is actually coded. It's almost in places just sort of actually quite upsetting to sort of have, even if this is a character the person has created as an essay of themselves, to have somebody go essentially take a hammer almost to what they've created, or what another person or what the coder character has created, and sort of be that self-lacerating.
I would agree with that, but I don't think that's what the narrative's trying to do, because of the big revelation of what Davy did. So I think in the context of this story that Coda was a separate person, but Davy is kind of like transfixing himself on this person. And it's like spelt out at the end that this is exactly what he's doing to Coda, and it's what caused their friendship to break apart.
So I don't know whether you could then co-opt that and actually say, well, this is actually what the narrator is actually essentially doing to Coda's games. He's not sort of playing them as games. He's trying to sort of make some grander story out of them. And this is like, well, this is what you're doing to my work. You're actually destroying it. You're making sort of what used to be a hobby fun because you're being so critical, and you're demanding things from me all the time.
I honestly had this written down as a flaw, and now it's turning into a big plus. Given that the theme in the game is Davy is trying to interpret Coda's work, and he never quite knows if his interpretation is correct, and he's adding his own meaning to it. I had written down that one of the few flaws in it is that the ending, it definitely has a few revelations, but it's still incredibly open-ended. And to make it an incredibly Philistine comparison, the ending of Inception, people really freaked out because they were like, "Whoa, does the top fall? Does the top not fall?" But that's only two outcomes. Whereas in the beginner's guide, I have a list of about 12 different outcomes that I came up with that are all possible within the game and outside. Whether like, oh, actually Davy and Coda are the same person. Coda represents his creativity, and Davy is the rationality and the always looking for deeper meaning. Or at one point, Coda somehow is the Stanley Parable. Or at one point, I've just put Davy equals the beginner's guide equals the game. And I forgot what I was even trying to go for there. But
I think oh, sorry, keep going.
No, but given that such a deep theme in the game is Davy looking at this person's work and trying to ascribe meaning to it, it's probably kind of a plus that there's so many actual. It's a plus that he makes the player kind of take on his role by we're ascribing our own meaning to it right now.
Yeah, I think my favorite bit of criticism I've seen of this game is, do you guys know Ear Signal?
No.
Ear Signal, Campster, that YouTube sort of video game essayist?
Still no.
Still not ringing a bell, sorry, dog.
Well, then I get to explain something neat to you.
Ooh.
He did this video about the beginner's guide and did it like one of his normal videos until he started making connections that what was happening in the game, that Davey was basically being a critic and putting his own meaning into the game and passing it off like he truly knew someone. He started interconnecting, he started adding in clips from some of his old videos of him doing the same thing, and just sort of mimicked a similar kind of downward spiral. That was just kind of clever. Yeah, this is a game that you cannot really put down a definite meaning of, because I don't think it was meant to have one. I think it was meant just to prod at players and get them to think more about how they like dissect a work. how they look at it. And most importantly, I wonder if he's trying to make a point that you shouldn't judge the creator by what they make, because sometimes a prison is just a prison.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of interesting to sort of take that ethos and attach it to sort of, there was actually a really very good quote that I shall sort of co-opt and borrow to sort of draw a parallel with. Hideo Kojima, the creator of Metal Gear, was sort of asked why the character Quiet, who is basically very scantily clad, it's like a Metal Gear 5, and he comes up with this very long, convoluted explanation. This is somebody talking about their own work, and somebody asked Yoko Taro, the creator of Drakengard and now Nier Automata, why the character was a girl, and he sort of pauses for a moment and says, "Because I like pretty girls." So, I mean, it's sort of going, well, maybe sometimes, instead of the creator going, oh, there's this deep existential reason for, well, I don't know, I set most of my games in prisons, is that they may turn around and go, I'm a lazy bastard, and frankly, prisons are easy.
Yeah.
You just remind me of that time, every time someone tries to ask Yoko Taro about why gay people are in his game, just like, because gay people exist.
What?
That's finally someone who's just like, here's a gay person.
And this is why
Shrug.
this is why everyone loves Yoko Taro. He must be protected.
Yep.
You'll make another game if someone will give him money. That's what he said. Same.
This is sort of to do with the prisons, but there's a little link back to Dr. Langeskov, mainly just because we mentioned that. What's that? Justin Voiland? Is that the guy's name? The Rick and Morty guy?
I want that Szechuan sauce, Morty. It's gonna take 9 seasons, Morty. 9 season arcs. That tragic backstory I gave to the bug man was all false, Morty. It's all about that Szechuan Mulan sauce.
Oh gee, Rick.
Make nuggets.
Oh gee.
What's happening, Rick?
So, no, it's because when you listen to those tapes and Dr. Langeskov the second time round, I found there's a very Tommy Wiseau element to them.
Depends.
And it was just kind of a link to... There's a link to Tommy Wiseau in that, in the beginner's guide, all of those games that Davies designed and made, well, that Davey, and then, like, in finger quotation marks, that Coda has made, they all look like, creative talent and all, but they all do look kind of like the kind of thing that Jim Sterling would be covering on a best of Steam Greenlight thing. They don't look
Okay,
great. And
that I find questionable.
oh. No, but
because there's like no obvious glitches or just like, okay, maybe the spaceship one, but that's the only one because all the others are so weird and artsy that I don't think he'd actually play them, because then he couldn't complain about consumer rights.
I mean, like, if they were all released separately or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But the point is that, looping back to Tommy Wiseau, do you know why we don't have loads of Tommy Wiseaus right now? Because making something that's still entertaining but also terrible is incredibly difficult. And I just want to say, Davey Wheaton or Coda, they made a compilation of games that, from a gameplay perspective, like, if you played the game without any narration, you'd be thinking, what the hell is this? It's a staircase that I'm going slow on, and here's a game where I can't go backwards, where I can only move backwards for some reason. It is so incredibly difficult to make something like that on purpose. And Davey Wheaton, he did design the Stanley Parable. He's clearly incredibly talented. But
honestly, I don't think it's that hard, because you just have to play a few Game Jam games and you get a good idea of how that works. It's just about experimenting with the basic mechanics of a video game and seeing, okay, what hasn't been done before in a regular video game, and doing that.
Actually, out of interest, what were people's favourite single game from the Beginner's Guide?
That's a good question.
The most memorable one for me is the one where you can't move forwards. Just because I remember, that's the kind of thing where I played it and I was like, hey, this would actually be pretty interesting as a whole game. That's just an interesting mechanic.
I would have to say the one where you clean the house.
I would agree entirely with that one as well.
Yeah, not just because it's like a big story point where you get the feeling that something's off with Davy for like the first major open time, but also because it's just kind of cozy and interesting, and it sort of reminds me of Animal Crossing, except purposely dumber.
It does feel
And Animal Crossing is already dumb as dirt.
It did feel both in sort of his narrative that he's attached to the games, but also just generally in terms of the thematic sort of elements. I mean, even if we take the coders things as sort of, he's just basically creating games for the hell of it, rather than, you know, he's working through some issues. It does feel like the one game that's sort of actually quite cathartic. It does feel like the one game, instead of like, I don't know, the sort of the typical video game thing, which is from either get to point A to point B, or sort of destroy something on the way from point A to point B. It did feel more like something quite holistic in comparison to a lot of the other games. And okay, he may not be we may go back to the sort of thing, well, prisons are easy to code, but it did feel the most, I think, of all the games, like something positive. And it was actually, as you say, Dark, it is very much sort of in that same Animal Crossing thing, you know, instead of being sort of destructive, it's creative. Instead of being sort of, you know, quite grim in aspect, it's actually quite cosy and warm, and sort of actually almost sort of nice, I suppose, in comparison to the sort of quite oppressive environments, deliberate or non-deliberate, throughout the rest of the game.
Oh, I just remembered something. Do you remember at the end of that big series of prison games where there's that one crying woman?
Oh yeah, that was creepy.
Do you think he just threw that in just to screw with people?
Oh yeah, because it did feel very, actually looking back on it, quite manipulative. It's like, oh, he's working through some things. It's like, well, maybe he's seeing what, you know, adding sound would do.
Or maybe Code is a woman and blah 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 blah.
Analysis. Maybe Coder is in fact actually a woman. Because does he ever?
Yeah, that's definitely critic bait. Yeah, right,
so
there.
Is Coder in fact a woman? Is this in fact a metaphor for feeling inadequate as a woman in a man's environment? And off the critics go, and there they go. And by critics.
Yeah, it's about as subtle as the ending of Children of Men, where the boat comes in and it's like named Hope or the Future or something like that. Okay. It's like the movie came out of the screen and starts bashing you over the head with a metal bat.
Symbolism.
I miss bad.
Yeah, pretty much. Down. Oh, he made oh no, he didn't. He just did a year-end roundup.
I do have one criticism of the beginner's guide. I have it listed in my notes, and all I have written down is, do not make the Hobbit joke. So basically I'm going to make the Hobbit joke, is what I'm saying. But okay, I really, really like how, given looking at the story in the bluntest possible terms, this is not a video game that could have been made, I think, even on the indie scene, like 10 years ago. Just a game about one man looking through a video game portfolio from his friend who's learning to code, and it covers a bit of ground about the relationship between them. That absolutely couldn't have been made 10 years ago, and I absolutely love. I'm saying absolutely love. I love that games have gotten to a point where we can have video games about that now, about something that, I don't want to use the word trivial, but something a little lower key than, oh, the world is under attack. This is terrible.
Well, moreover, I think it is sort of indicating in this day and age you can make something like that in your bedroom. It's not that difficult. It's not outside the realms of possibility for somebody to make a single individual quite intricate games. I mean, particularly the last sort of couple of ones, or the ones where you're, for example, shown what actually lies beyond the thing. That do you remember the one where the sort of the walls are digitally removed by the narrator, and you sort of see these masses of sort of tunnels going off in every direction. I mean, that sort of indicates, I think you could probably do that if you were a relatively good coder, or if on a single machine. It would probably kill your machine, but it's sort of very, and I think in that way it's definitely a narrative you couldn't have got 10 years ago. But let's return to the point.
Oh, right. I feel like the beginner's guide, it is definitely in its own kind of genre, so I feel kind of cheap comparing it to other things. But if I were to mention some other Steam games that have had like big emotional impacts on me, Actual Sunlight is basically a description of a guy's life leading up to his suicide.
Attempted suicide. The guy's still alive, and he's currently writing for the sequel to the greatest game ever made, Always Sometimes Monsters.
Oh, awesome.
You get to be a hobo in late capitalism and try to survive desperately.
Oh, that's changed my opinion. Actual Sunlight is one of the happiest games I've ever played.
Oh no, Actual Sunlight is still far more depressing.
Yeah, God. And,
though Always Sometimes Monsters either ends with you or your best friend who ripped off your writing and destroyed your life at the barrel of a hitman's gun.
Oh.
Though you do get to also control the hitman to decide if you want to kill that guy or not.
Oh, okay.
But he's still a hobo who's crazy and also lost the love of their life, so.
Oh.
Video games, ladies and gentlemen, they're meant for entertainment and escapism. Not anymore.
I love Always Sometimes Monsters because one of the major things about the game is you can actually get part-time jobs, and almost every single one of them is a menial light nightmare. The first time I played it, I was doing a game where you have to move boxes to a truck, and I thought there was like a reward for moving 100 boxes, and there's not.
Oh boy.
Welcome to real life.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you have liked an achievement?
No achievements.
Oh. Have either of you played, I think, Papo and Yo? It's a
what?
It's named Papo and Yo, and it's a 3D puzzle platformer with little puzzle elements.
Rings
and it looks like a fun little. It looks like a fun little platformer, and it is fun. It's a very good game, and then it turns out it's a metaphor for breaking ties with a loved one because of alcoholism.
Oh.
So that was a gutting game as well. And my thing was that.
Have you ever played Inversion?
No, and I'm scared of what's coming.
Eversion?
Oh, Eversion. Yeah, I played Eversion. I want to do the scree noise that makes when the hands shoot up in Eversion, but that's too high pitched. Oh.
Yeah, fuck that game.
But yeah, Papo and Yo dealing with alcoholism and Actual Sunlight dealing with suicide.
That Dragon Cancer deals with a
yeah.
child dying of cancer, and it's like based on things that actually happened.
Yep. And you can see where the Hobbit joke is coming in. This is the only... Oh god, that's the worst segue I've ever made in my life. Children, yeah, terminal diseases, terrible. So about this Hobbit, right? It's...
I'm thinking about it, and I still think that Odin's Spear is sadder than all of these games.
Odin's Spear is like, haha, you like these characters. And instead of like, let's just make them all horrifically broken.
Oh.
God, man, fuck Odin. That guy ruins everything.
Yep.
Well, can you see how, in comparison to Actual Sunlight and Papo and Yo, I'm trying to get you to predict what the Hobbit joke is. The only criticism I have of the beginner's guide is that, in comparison to other games that have strong emotional impact, it's like a hobbit working at the butcher's.
What?
I don't get it.
The stakes are too low. But that's it. Stop recording. We're never gonna make. That's the high point. We're coming out like this. No, but yeah, I really love. I do like the beginner's guide. It's fantastic, but at its core, it's a story of a man and someone else and a friendship deteriorating, which is a very personal story. And it's a story that's a lot more. It's a lot easier to empathize with that story because it's probably personally happened to a lot of people.
I think it runs deeper.
It's clearly about more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, the Davy in this game clearly has depression.
Oh yeah.
And
like, that didn't happen because his friendship broke. His friendship broke because he had depression and was dealing with it in such a horrifically wrong way that he was making people think his friend had his issues.
And this is the sort of the crux of the game. It's sort of, if your critical viewpoint is dark and your critical viewpoint is sort of, it's always going to point out the negatives in everything, then, if you always see things from a dark perspective or you always assume darkness, then that's going to affect how you see the world. And I do think that the crux of the game and the point around which it pivots its plots and it pivots and criticism of it could, and sort of how it acts as a depiction, and I suppose a sort of criticism of criticism is sort of good.
Yeah, this is very different than Nymphomaniac by that one jack off that once defended the
Lars von
Nazis.
Trier.
Yeah,
Lars von Trier.
Lars von Trojan
Trier.
Wasn't he like?
Yeah,
Isn't he like a member of Metallica or something?
That's Lazarevich.
No.
Ah.
Yeah, Von Trier is a piece of shit.
Lazarevich is also a piece of shit, but that's another.
Nymphomaniac was basically 6 hours of him defending his own pedophilia and calling all his critics the real monsters by having the one character in the movie that was a critic turn out to be a rapist. He's the biggest piece of shit.
It's almost...
This game is nothing like that. No. This game doesn't hate its audience and isn't a big Nazi defending jagoff about everything. I honestly think Davy's trying to get something worked out himself while also trying to depart something to the audience, which is why that ending song Turn Back plays.
And that does seem to come very much out of somewhere nowhere. You've had this very naturalistic sort of analysis of these games, whether they are through the prism of his own depression, whether these are analysing somebody else's issues and how they're working through, and then out of nowhere the song just appears. It's like, hang on a minute, what? I mean, literally the first time I went, because it just suddenly does feel like, hang on a minute, what are we going on? We're just having this sort of a moment that where probably cinematically, or sort of if you're doing it in a terms of actually a visual essay, you would have let the camera run or simply switch off, and you're left with a song, and it's like, okay.
It's a very downbeat song though. It's like the lyrics are all what little lyrics there are basically telling you to look again at something,
which is just entirely apt for the narrative that's come before.
But it's done like in a very sad, pleading way. It's not like trying to give you a message. No. It's like trying to ask you to do something it desperately needs you to do for yourself. So yeah, this is a very, very deep game, and I kind of love it.
I think if the Stanley Parable is going to date well, this I think will date even better, both as a document of sort of how I suppose metagaming was at the time. I mean, how old is this game? What, 2000 and...
The Stanley Parable was 2013, and the Beginner's Guide was 2016.
So, I mean, it's a very good sort of visual document of how, or I suppose interactive document of how sort of video gaming and sort of, I suppose, the meta-narrative was in video gaming. If
I had to make a comparison here, I would say the Stanley Parable is like Rick and Morty, and that's very
Mm.
nihilistic, very dark. It's amusing, but if you look at it a bit further, it suddenly becomes kind of
Mm.
disgusting, which makes it all the more impressive that it keeps you
Mm.
in there with its sense of humor. But then you have something like The Beginner's Guide, which is more like Moral Oral in its later seasons, which basically just dropped all comedy and started to seriously examine these characters and just how
Mm.
horrifying and grim their reality was in trying to find hope within
Mm.
that.
But I think.
And by the way, if you haven't seen Moral Oral, you really should see Moral Oral. It is
Mm.
amazing.
But I think almost you sort of to give another analysis. If the Stanley Parable is sort of, well, sort of, I suppose you could describe it as almost Beckett'ian. It's almost, sort of taking, where does the line between the stage and the performers and the audience, and how do we actually approach the area of the so I suppose the sort of the landscape of the stage, and how you play a play and how a play interacts with its audience or doesn't interact with its audience, because you're very much sort of placed in a narrative where the narrator is aware that you are that in certain endings that Stanley is either a fictional character or somebody controlled by the thing, or a puppet, or something. In other words, the fourth wall disappears at some point. You are either in a meta narrative where where Stanley is a character puppeted by the main character, or Stanley's narrative just sort of disappears and we're sort of left with the narrators struggling to find a narrative to place Stanley into, because the player has essentially bent it so much that the current narrative just doesn't exist. So I mean, you could I suppose even draw parallels with Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, but I struggle to think of a work in fiction or factual, or even sort of, I suppose, cinema or thing that you can actually compare to The Beginner's
I would
Guide.
think you would have to go to the. I think you would have to go to the realm of comics for that.
I mean, you're having to, it's difficult to compare. I mean, I suppose the only work I can think of that would actually be directly comparable, and this is a very, very loose fit, is something like possibly the work of James Joyce. It's just so difficult to interpret as a work. I mean, I suppose it's something you can't simply do in a. It's something I think you would have to talk about visually. The only thing I can think of potentially off the top of my head is, I suppose, there's elements of the unreliable narrator. How is the narrator actually things so, but it's almost, and I think this is what you will start to see in video gaming in perhaps the next sort of 5-10 years, is you will see narratives appear in video gaming that you cannot do in any other medium. You can't do it in a play. You can't do it as a cinematic thing. You cannot do it in a written, or even in terms of comics, a visual format. So I think if the Stanley Parable will last, this will last even better.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think all
So
three
in
of them
other
will
words,
last. They're good.
nah, I'm gonna have to question Dr. Laskinov.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
It's just too one note of a joke. It's eventually gonna, as comedy taste involved, it's gonna wear out its welcome.
I think it's all. I
it'll
think.
last in the sense that it's okay. And I don't think anyone will ever, like, in 10 years' time, be Dr. Langeskov, piece of crap. But I just have pretty low standards for games.
It's a very slight game, and I think as we did describe it before we started this podcast, it is very much the garnish. It's a little aside, it's a little aperitif. It has the same sort of concepts, but it approaches them with a much lighter and a much gentler tone. It's very much sort of going, oh, what if we could look behind the scenes in a video game? Oh, what if the video game is in fact actually like, I don't know, and actually we return to the idea of a stage production, and it's actually, I know it's very interesting that it does use the language and the visual elements of a stage production to sort of say, oh, video games are like this, and you got to make sure the rain happens at the right time. You have to and I suppose it's not a bad game, but it compared to the other two, what it does in terms of critiquing how a video game works is so, as you said, so one note, so very much sort of, oh, isn't this funny, isn't this? It's like a little, I suppose, a little parlour trick compared to the other two.
Basically, it's like the episode of Rick and Morty where the alien heads come down and they make jokes about religion and making music, and that's it. While the rest of Rick and Morty is like, hey, here's an existential crisis where the character is living right next to his decomposing body.
I gotta start watching Rick and Morty.
I mean, and
it's fucked up.
And sometimes you do need to thrash out a concept, to pull a concept out to the maximum it will. But sometimes it's, you need to do something a little bit with a little bit more gravitas. So I hope if Crows make more games, and I'm sure they will, that they are more ambitious, definitely, without a doubt, because this is...
Yeah, this seemed to be just like a taste of things to come.
And as for this...
You can kind of tell which artist I like more, because Pew pretty much just does the greatest hits versions of the Stanley Parable while sort of missing what kind of made it excellent. And the guy who made it that excellent in the first place went on to make something completely different that blows it out of the water. Like, it's telling you what type of artist they are. One is an entertainer, and the other one is more interested in something harder to describe. And I think we are running very long.
But I think that's typified, and that's almost sort of summed up by the final visual of the beginner's guide. It's sort of...
Oh yeah, it zooms out, it repeats the spaceship thing, except suddenly it's magnified by thousands, and you're just surrounded by all these mazes and stars.
And it's almost sort of it's almost sort of elegiac. It's sort of, well, this is what I suppose video games are in this space, in this day and time. Even when you have so much, to compare it to the Stanley Parable, it's like, well, even if you got so much choice, you're always going to be running through a maze of some construction, whether it be huge or very tiny.
So basically what you're saying is, no matter your age, you're still just a rat in a cage.
Play me off!
And I think with that, we're going to go ahead and put this discussion to a stop, or it will go on forever.
I had a final thought.
Okay, let's do final thoughts then.
It was the sad sniffing that got me this. Oh man, now I feel like my final thoughts aren't that good, because I've just got a very cliched, if you tore the Stanley Parable in half, and one half got the self-referential humour and the lampshading of video game tropes, that would be Dr. Langeskov. And if the other half got the existential crises and the angst and the reflection of the true purpose of a narrator in video games and the kind of stories that you can build upon that would be the beginner's guide. And I'm just really excited to see where both of these developers go.
Yeah, I agree with
that's
that.
a perfect summation, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Any more thoughts? Are we finally free?
We have to go back. I've never even seen Lost. I think that's from Lost.
It's not.
Actually, yeah, it is. We have to go back to the island.
Oh, do you know what the best ending to the Stanley Parable is?
What?
The one where you get the North to rebel.
Oh god. No, I wonder if anyone's even gonna get that anymore.
I will.
And with that, let me explain what we will be doing next episode. Thank you for joining us, Tama. We'll probably have someone else for the next episode. I'm looking for a third in a time zone that doesn't leave them up at 4 in the morning. Sorry about that.
4:40 in the morning.
Yep.
And what we'll be doing is doing an idea I had where I pick out 5 different $1 games on Steam.
Oh no.
And we will play through all of them and see what we find. And don't worry, I did not go around looking for garbage. All of these seem very interesting, and I know you're gonna like one of them.
Oh.
The games I found are A Trip to Yugoslavia Director's Cut, some sort of point-and-click game with FMV, Grand Pigeon's Duty, a very strange arcade adventure game that has like mafia pigeons or something, like doing the usual pooping thing, but the presentation seems kind of not that, so I'm kind of curious of where it's going with this.
Doing the usual pooping thing.
Yeah, it's Potty Pigeon's Revenge.
You sure you didn't just get mixed up with Hatterful Boyfriend again, dog?
Oh no, that one's way too much for this. Let's see, third is Rubber Ducky and the Rainbow Gun, an arcade shooting game with like sprite graphics that looks really chaotic and fun. Fourth, I picked solely for the title, is called Samurai Jazz. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with samurais or jazz, but...
Isn't Samurai Jazz that Cartoon Network character who's fighting a coup all the time and stuff?
No.
No.
And the fifth, and definitely not the final one, definitely not the least, is Shower with Your Dad Simulator 2015. Do you still shower with your dad? I know for a fact that game is actually good, and if you haven't played it yet, I'm not going to spoil it.
Oh god.
Do you still shower with your dad?
Is that the
Do you?
Is that the subtitle or is this an interrogation? 'Cause
The full title of it is Shower with Your Dad Simulator 2015. Do you still shower with your dad?
if this is an interrogation, I gotta log off like right now.
We'll see you next time for these 5 games, and hopefully at least 2 of them will be good.
Maybe even 3. No.
I really have high hopes for Samurai Jazz. Doo doo.
Turn back. Turn back from this cave. You said, let me prove that I'm brave. Let me keep going. But the cave goes for miles and miles and miles. And you're so tired, but I know that you're strong. So turn back. Turn